Okay. I'd like to call the regular council meeting to order for June 13th, 2022. And we are honored to be gathered on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. And the public may view the meeting live on Village of Cumberland YouTube channel. First item is approval of the agenda. We have a late item, 5.2.
Move approval with late item.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Minutes, adoption.
Move adoption.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Delegation. That council receive the delegation of Grant Schilling, Community Facilitator Dawn to Dawn, and Carver Everson, Comox First Nation artist.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Gentlemen, please come forward.
Hi, everybody. Gaelic Hesla, Nuguam, Grant Schilling. I am learning Kwakala. Kakalaga is my favorite word. Crow. So I'll crow on here, and I'll introduce Carver shortly, and I just thought I'd want to take the opportunity to introduce Carver, and also just to update you on what we've been doing with Guaxidas Arts programming, and culminating in the totem poles that Carver is going to be carving, and then I had some ideas to discuss with regard to that. So yeah, we've been hosting at the Abbey cedar weaving, beading workshops with a variety of people: Keish Everson, Tony Frank, Charlene Everson, Jeannie Walker, Tina Speck, who's Dawn to Dawn's two-spirited queer peer support worker for our Rainbow House project, and discussing a variety of issues with regard to indigenization. And the idea of the programming was formed when we thought we were going to have Guaxidas, the actual housing in place. And after discussions with me being eternally optimistic, wrote a grant thinking that we would receive the housing, and then the arts funding would be part of the indigenization of space, which will be a part of the programming for Guaxidas. I spoke to the arts officer at BC Arts, and she's like, actually the indigenization should come first, so proceed with what you're planning on doing, and you know, we'll work on the contingency with regard to the totem pole. So I just thought I'd quote myself in terms of indigenization is a process of naturalizing indigenous knowledge systems and making them evident to transform spaces, places, and hearts. And this can be accomplished through cultural practices and the presence of indigenous art, knowledge keepers, programming, and native plant systems. And the goal of Guaxidas is to incorporate into the planning, programming, design, and landscape of the project this indigenous presence. So that programming is kind of laying the way for when Guaxidas is and will be here, and I'm sure it will be. The culmination of that is going to be Carver's totem pole project, as well as I was remiss, I could have brought Marlo Wiley here as well, who's carving a cedar panel for the interior of Guaxidas. But I'd like to introduce Carver, and then I think that the question is, there's an ask, which is basically, Carver is very generously, we just went up to the site, agreed to carve on site the totem pole, and I think that would be a real great opportunity for engagement with the public, and we agreed that, you know, it'd be good probably just to have certain visiting hours, and because the school's so nearby, he was just saying they were doing that in Powell River, that they had different groups of kids and other folks coming to visit while they were carving there. And I think that would be a great opportunity for the youth here especially, but for the community itself, and to set aside hours to do that. So that's why I think it's integral to have the totem pole on site. And, you know, as I said, Carver's agreed to be here for that, which would be awesome. We're looking at September-ish to do that. And as I discussed with Leslie, just whatever, and Kevin, whatever mechanisms are necessary to make it just easy for Carver to be there. It is his unceded territory after all, and set up terms of engagement with the school, et cetera, and the village in terms of having them visit Carver while he's there. So the other part, which is, I guess, something just throwing out there now, I mean, I know we're going to get the funding for Guaxidas, but if something were to happen, we just had a meeting with the Wiser Group who are consulting with regard to Guaxidas, and apparently I guess the next drawdown for BC Housing is going to be in the spring. And so Carver's carving in the fall, and ideally we would like to have the totem poles there for the housing, but in the absence of receiving funding, maybe we need a plan A and B as to where the totem poles would go. So I'm just throwing that out there and making you aware of that idea for if that eventuates. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Carver and have him introduce himself and talk about the totem poles he has in mind.
Cool. Yeah, that was great, Grant. Thank you so much. It's so great to be here. Gail Kesla, Nuguam Tlugoyakalis, Gayutlan Comox Tlu Takis, Ola Kalamutla Nokai, Gyakakus. My English name is Carver Everson. My Kwakwala name is Tlugoyakalis, which means supernatural gift from above on the beach. What I said is I'm so grateful that all of you are here. It makes my heart feel really good. So obviously over the past, I guess since I started carving, I've been a part of a strong revitalization amongst the Comox Valley with carving. I started carving in 2012, 2013, and I was part of a pretty monumental project with Calvin Hunt doing the administration poles, both of those two that are on the Comox First Nation, the territory there. And then since those poles, I've been a part of so many since, and all part of cultural revitalization, like I said, in the Comox Valley, and it's something that is really near and dear to my heart and what I do. And just kind of reflecting on a little bit of what like Grant said and how important it is that we have culture and community, and I think a project like this for Cumberland is super important. And even just reflecting on the work that I'm doing in Powell River with Calvin Hunt, we're doing two 21-foot poles for the Tla'amin Nation over there, and seeing all the community, all the kids, that come in and see and that communicate with us and that get a better understanding, and of the land that they're on, the people that are around them, the reserves that are on their territory or in Powell River. It really, it's super important, right? And I see that this as being an opportunity like that, to bridge a gap, to be for this project to like I say, bridge a gap and have people come and experience and see what it is that the culture here has to offer. And for me, that's a huge component of what I do, is to teach people, the importance of it all, and what it means to do the work that we do, and to understand the people who are here, and who have been here since time immemorial and continue to be here, the descendants of the people that have always been here, right? So, I don't really have. What is there?
What were you thinking of carving, Carver?
Oh yeah, the car. Yeah, so kind of the vision for the two poles are two welcome figures, one man and then one a woman, with our local crests on the base. So one being a thunderbird, and then one being an ihos, which is a double-headed sea serpent that relate to the land that we're on, the traditional Pentlatch territory that we all love and work on and live on. So that's kind of the vision that I have in mind, and there'd be two 12-foot poles with their hands out, kind of welcoming, and that's a gesture of welcoming and being on the land. And yeah, so that's my vision of what I'd like to see this project as and those poles as, and yeah.
How long do you think it'll take you to do that?
Yeah, roughly it'll probably take around, I'd say 2 months. Yeah, start to finish. Yeah, and that would be, I think that's pretty generous. You know, I think like realistically, it could probably be done even sooner than that, but that's kind of like a generous timeline. Yeah, is 2 months. Yeah.
Are you open to a few questions?
Of course. Yeah, without a doubt.
Okay. When it's placed, you want that to be the permanent place? They're not something that you move around?
Yeah, oh yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where on the property will they be? On First Street?
We were just discussing
Yeah.
that, and that's something we discussed with the architect. So there's supposed to be the idea, and it's open to discussion, was to be at the entrance. So here's the big tree here, and it's the property, the design of the building as is now is basically an L with a kind of a courtyard playground area in front of the tree and surrounded by that L. So the poles will be placed at what would be like a foyer or an entrance to the building.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So people would file between the poles.
So it'd kind of be a similar format to the Comox Valley Art Gallery with those two poles. Yeah, and that kind of like that nice kind of entrance. So that's kind of like what we're envisioning. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Councillor Sproul.
Wow, I'm just awed that we're going to have something like this happening. It's a great idea, and what an honor for us to get something by you, Carver. Thank you.
Councillor Kettler.
Yeah, thanks so much. And yeah, I think we all really appreciate you being the artist doing this and contributing your creativity to Cumberland and having those welcome figures. I think that's really nice and really representative of the project itself. That is, that we do want it to be inclusive and welcoming, and I think that's wonderful. I was wondering about what you might need on site as far as equipment and possibly like a shelter if you're going to be carving there.
Yeah, we were talking about that, and yeah, Grant you have a hookup for. Yeah.
Carver's one requirement was that it's covered.
Yeah.
It's covered while working. So I have, through our connections in the village and through Relay, I have that lined up. The other thing that he mentioned tonight was though a storage container for his tools.
Yeah, so a storage for all the chainsaws and hand tools and whatnot, and gas and oil, that type of thing. So a storage container or something of that sort would be really great. And then also washrooms are key too.
As accessory partnership with help, we could go over to their
Well,
start building
yeah.
relations with them.
There are some sea cans there right now.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
There are sea cans there right now
Yeah,
that
so
they're not being used. So I'm sure if you talk to them, they'll let you use them. Okay, Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. Thanks, Carver. Carver, it's really nice to see you. It's been a really long time, and I haven't seen you since the museum contribution you made. So
Oh, yeah,
I'm
no
really
way.
proud and happy to see that, and
Cool.
just to see your growth. I've known Carver since we played hockey together 10 or 12 years ago, a really long time.
Totally.
So I'm just really happy to see you here, and Grant, always a pleasure, and can't wait to see this happen. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, looking forward to it a lot.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much. This is awesome. I'd love to see. I'm looking forward to seeing the carving happening and having actual art, Indigenous art out in the community. Because I love the indigenization. That was a new word for me, so thank you. Yeah, I think. If we don't get that housing, we have two entrances to Cumberland. One is Royston Road and one is Cumberland Road, and perhaps that's an alternate, a backup plan. But I'm sure we will. I'm sure we will get the funding for the building, and we will have them in the entrance, and that will be beautiful. So thank you. And I think the idea of having, I appreciate your willingness to have people come watch and participate in that. That's an awesome opportunity for villagers and the kids and schools and stuff.
And I also should mention that there's going to be, as part of the programming, I've worked in, for lack of a better word, a consecration of the blessing of the site by KFN, the Kumagwe. So there'll be that in either, I don't know what the proper protocol is, either after or before the totem poles are put up. So that's going to be part of that, and obviously the village would be invited to that as well. Yeah. And I still have native plant workshops and a drumming workshop to come as part of the Guaxidas Arts programming, and some of that might take place on site as well. So.
Oh, okay, great. Awesome. Later on in our agenda, we're making meetings with ministry staff for UBCM, and I'm sure one of the ones on the list will be housing, BC Housing, that we will make a presentation there on behalf of the affordable housing. We'll go and ask the appropriate questions.
Yeah.
So we don't get forgotten.
Hold their feet to the fire.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes. Okay.
And I don't know if this is for you, Kevin, or what the process is, but hopefully we can keep it simple, silly in terms of setting up Carver there. And I'd really prefer not to engage Island Health over this because I can't wait that long. By the time they get back to us, so.
I actually have a meeting with him on Wednesday, so I'll talk to the facilitator there at the meeting.
Do you want to do that, or is it like?
No, it won't be a problem, I'm sure.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make sure. Yes, Councillor Brown?
And if I can just add one thing, the village is currently working on a lease agreement for that site, which would help give us some, I guess, more authorities over how it would get used without having to go through Island Health, and that's in process. So what Grant and I spoke about is that's hopefully going to be wrapped up fairly soon. That would just be another thing that would enable a little bit of an easier partnership with this and avoid you having to go through Island Health. So.
Yeah, I mean, we've had events there for coldest day of the year and done stuff there already, and it's I'm sure we didn't have to experience the Island Health experience. So that's all I'm saying about that. So hopefully Carver can be set up there in September. One other point is that I've applied with Western Forest Products for cultural log for them, and that would really help offset some of the costs, and I'm optimistic about that. But I'm always optimistic about these things, but I'm optimistic about that too, so I have a good feeling about that. And I'd like to say that all the arts programming and all that was vetted through KFN and council, and we received a letter of support to BC Arts initially with regard to all of this, so it's not much.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. You've done a lot of work to get this through, Grant. Thank you very much, and I'm sure your board are very supportive.
Yeah.
Okay, and we will get back to you on the other. Yes?
Okay.
Sorry, I just had one more question. So you want coverage and a box for your tools, but is it, does the site need to be secure? Or is that not a concern?
Sea can.
Yeah.
Right, but for the actual totem?
Should there be fencing around it, or?
Yeah, I mean,
Gosh, I hope it's not necessary. I'd like to
No, I
know
just-
you know, but that's a reasonable question.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Carver.
Yeah, like the project that I'm doing, I'm part of in Powell River, it doesn't have fencing or anything, and everyone's very respectful,
Okay.
you know, and they're very understanding of what is going on, you know, and maybe that's something to do with kind of getting it out to the community about what's
Yeah.
happening, and
Yeah, or
you know, and
signage or something on this. side.
yeah, maybe signage or something or whatnot. And yeah, I think that it is good to have something that's personable, right? You can walk up to it and, you know, you can communicate with the artist or whoever's that's there. And yeah, I think that there's something really special about that. So,
Awesome.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen.
alrighty, thank you all very much. Yeah, Gaelic Essa.
Oh, there is a recommendation there?
That council directs staff to work with dawn-to-dawn action on Homelessness Society on approval for the use of 3345 2nd Street property for the purposes of pole carving activities and related works as part of the Guaxidas project.
Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Carried. No unfinished business. Reports. That council received the development variance permit Asiano Bevan Road Amendment Report.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. The purpose of this report is to seek council approval of an amendment to Development Variance Permit 2019-09 DV. On September 30th, 2019, Council granted a variance to allow the proposed subdivision with the majority of lots under 1 hectare to provide on-site wastewater disposal systems instead of connection to the community wastewater system. The applicant is now proposing to further vary this requirement and not provide on-site wastewater disposal systems as a condition of subdivision final approval. To receive final subdivision approval, the applicant entered into a servicing agreement for lots 2 to 6 and provided security for installation of on-site systems as required by the subdivision and development bylaw. Their servicing agreement requires the applicant to install the required works within 1 year of final approval. A security in the amount of 120% of the estimated cost of installation is held by the village, and if the works are not completed within the allotted time, the village could have the works installed using security funds. However, it was later understood that it's not practical for on-site wastewater systems to be designed and installed at time of subdivision, as each system has to be designed specifically for its intended use. The applicant is requesting the requirement for on-site servicing as a condition of subdivision be removed, and then the installation of on-site wastewater systems would be required at the time of building permit and would be carried out by the developer. Should the variance be approved, the servicing agreement would be canceled and the security would be returned to the applicant. Staff considered this variance to be minor.
Okay, questions from members of council? Councillor Sullivan?
No.
No? Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, I was just wondering sort of what the risk is, what the village might take on by moving the this fee to the development permit.
I believe the risk would be minimal. They're privately owned lots, so if they don't sell it, the lot's just not going to be developed. Like, there'd be no point in having a wastewater system installed that's never used anyway. It just makes more sense to have it done by the developer so they can design it specific to the project.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense since they're going to be completely different operations on each site. So we do right now have a servicing agreement with a deposit, which would then go back to the developer. And then do we get a new agreement? Like, how does that, the security deposit, does that come back to us in a different way?
We hold a building permit security, and that wouldn't be refunded they wouldn't get occupancy if they didn't have a wastewater system. They wouldn't be able to operate their business anyway.
Right.
So it wouldn't be beneficial for them to not do it. Wouldn't go. Wouldn't work.
Okay, no further questions? Someone like to move it?
That council approve an amendment to the development variance permit 2019-07 DVP to vary the subdivision and development bylaw number 948, 2012 to not require the construction of on-site wastewater infrastructure for the property described as Lot A, Section 34, Township 10, Comox District Plan, EPP 93477.
Seconder? Councillor Sproul, all in favor? Carried. Next, that council receive the development permit and development variance permit 3284 2nd Street referral to APC report.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
All right, so the village has received an application for development permit and development variance permit. The purpose of this report is to request referral to the Advisory Planning Commission for recommendation. A vacation rental business has operated on the property since 2008. The current owners applied for a business license for a vacation rental in February 2020, shortly after they took ownership. When the property ownership changes, a new business license application is required. The construction without building permits must be addressed, and parking must be provided or cash in lieu paid before a new license can be issued. So the development permit part of this report is to convert the existing addition to an ADU. And the requested variances to the zoning bylaw are as follows. So increase the maximum permitted gross floor area for an ADU from 90 meters squared to 133.8 meters squared to accommodate conversion of the ground floor garage to living space. A garage is not included in the GFA of an ADU above, but if the garage is converted to living space, then it becomes part of the ADU. Increase the permitted height of a two-story ADU from 7.5 meters to 7.6 meters, as the structure is already existing. Allow a breezeway connecting the primary dwelling to the proposed ADU. As per zoning bylaw, an ADU must be fully detached with no breezeway to any single-family dwelling on the lot. Increase the maximum permitted gross floor area of a secondary suite from 90 square meters to 100.8 square meters to legalize the existing secondary suite. Increase the maximum permitted percentage distribution of the secondary suite from 40% of the gross floor area of the residence to 50%. Allow a shipping container on the lot. Zoning bylaw section 411 storage prohibits the use of shipping containers as accessory storage buildings in any zone other than prescribed in the bylaw. And if that were to be approved, then vary the minimum rear setback and exterior side setbacks for the shipping container. And finally, reduce the required number of required vehicular parking stalls from 7 to 4. So I'm just going to go through each of the headlines, I guess, headers. So for the accessory dwelling unit, the purpose of converting the existing addition to an ADU is to retain the kitchen. The structure was approved as an addition to the primary dwelling in 2012 and was built to comply with zoning regulations at the time and did not originally include a kitchen. If the addition were to become an ADU, it is 0.1 meters or 0.3 feet over height. The property was previously zoned R1, which was zoning bylaw 717, the previous one, 1997, which allowed a maximum building height of 9 meters. So the addition at the time was in compliance with that height. The current zoning bylaw permits two-story ADUs to be a maximum of 7.5, so there's a small difference there. The upstairs living space of the proposed ADU has a valid occupancy permit, except for the kitchen, and complies with the maximum GFA of the ADU, or of an ADU. However, the variance application includes increasing the permitted GFA so that building permits can be issued for the ground floor conversion from garage to 2 bedrooms with en-suites. ADUs are permitted to have, again, the maximum GFA of 90 meters squared, and must be less than 75% of the GFA of the single-family dwelling. So the existing addition is only 66% of the primary dwelling, but has a total gross floor area of 133.8 meters squared. The applicant would be required to install an electrical vehicle charger accessible to an on-site parking space building permit. The existing landscaping is established and does not require any additional plantings or hardscaping, and then the exterior of the proposed ADU matches the primary dwelling. For the breezeway, so to be considered an addition, the structure needed to be connected to the primary dwelling originally. That was achieved through the construction of the deck, but the addition cannot be converted to an ADU without either removing the deck, as an ADU must be fully detached, or obtaining a variance to keep it. The deck provides an outdoor amenity area and access for the upper floor tenants and guests, and a covered area for the doors below. The secondary suite. The requested variances to increase the permitted GFA of the secondary suite and to increase the percentage distribution compared to the primary dwelling are consistent with recent revisions to the building code related to secondary suites. The larger suites also allow for more livable space, which increases the potential for the unit to be rented by a family or group, should it be a vacation rental, or rented as a large enough unit to accommodate a family or roommates. And then parking. So 2 on-site parking spaces are required for the secondary and ADU, so 1 each. The spaces must be provided or cash in lieu paid at time of building permit. 7 parking spaces, an additional 5, are required for the vacation rental use at 1 per bedroom. So to obtain the business license, the spaces need to be provided or cash in lieu paid. There are currently no parking spaces on the property, and tenants and guests currently park perpendicular or angled along 2nd and Penrith. The variance to reduce the required on-site parking from 7 spaces to 4 spaces. The applicant proposes to provide 1 space on a new driveway off of Penrith and pay cash in lieu for the remaining 3. The applicant proposes that paying cash in lieu is for more spaces should not be required, as there is ample on-street parking. And at $3,800 a space, cash in lieu for 6 parking spots would be $22,800. Cash in lieu for 3 spaces would be $11,400. So, and the last variance is the shipping container. So the shipping container was placed on site sometime between 2014 and 2016, around the time that the 2 bedrooms were converted from garage to bedrooms. Shipping containers were prohibited from residential zones in the 2016 zoning bylaw update. However, it's not clear if the shipping container was placed prior to this. Regardless, setbacks for accessory buildings were not followed, and the structure is non-compliant. Applicants are seeking to retain a variance to retain the shipping container and further to allow it within the existing setback area. The rationale for keeping the storage container is bike storage for the vacation rental. The previous owners of the property originally added the shipping container as bike storage, and the applicants are continuing to do the same. The shipping container offers secure storage for guest bikes and provides storage space for patio furniture in the winter. The applicants feel that removing the shipping container and building a new accessory building to meet the required setbacks would be less aesthetically pleasing to the neighbors and less secure for guests' bikes. They feel that the secure bike storage is a large attractant to guests, and a loss of this amenity could result in lost revenue. Staff suggested turning 1 of the suites on the main floor of the proposed ADU into bicycle storage. However, applicants were concerned about the loss of revenue after investing into updating the suites. The shipping container is visible from the street, which impacts the aesthetics of the streetscape. And shipping containers are prohibited from residential areas as they are deemed industrial in nature. And that is it.
Okay, questions from council members? We'll start with Councillor Sullivan.
Is this for referral? I have lots of questions. Are we going to usually we refer? Do we ask the questions
Yes.
first?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I guess I have comments more than questions. So
Do you want to wait then until
yeah,
it comes
I
back?
think I like to hear. I thought it's usually our process where we don't
Yeah.
muddy these waters before we share
Okay.
with other people. But
Yes. Okay, Councillor Brown?
I have a couple of questions. So, I appreciate the attempt to legalize the situation, and also that the context has changed dramatically since the previous owners, and this will take some flexibility. But I'm curious right off the start that in the R1A zone, we're allowed 3 dwellings on a lot, and this has 4 dwellings. So that's my first question.
There's just 3 for now. So the primary, and the secondary suite are in the same original house. And then the addition, which is the proposed ADU. And there are 2 bedrooms downstairs. But building code doesn't require buildings to be attached inside. You could have an outside door. So it technically is just 1 unit.
Okay, in the
Proposed
description,
ADU.
it
yes.
says currently on the property there is a 2-story single-family dwelling with 2 bedrooms upstairs and 3 bedrooms downstairs, and a 2-story addition connected by a deck 2 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. So if we allow this, then it's 4 dwellings. And is that allowed in R1A zone?
Well, a dwelling unit, I believe the definition is that it has to have a full kitchen in it to be considered a dwelling unit.
And isn't that what they're asking for?
No, so they just have a bathroom and a bedroom, and then like a coffee maker, microwave. So not a full kitchen. They're I guess you can think of them as just 2 bedrooms with exterior doors with their own bathrooms.
So that is not going to be rented as a suite.
Not a dwelling unit. I guess you could call it a suite, but it's just a bedroom. Like a hotel room with no kitchen, essentially.
So will it be rented as a vacation rental?
I believe
guess
so.
Is my question. So that means 4 dwellings. No?
No, because it would just be, the ADU would technically have 4 bedrooms in it. So 2 upstairs and 2 downstairs. So it would be considered 1 dwelling unit with 4 bedrooms.
That are rented separately. Okay. Also, the parking, in my calculation, again, using the description that is on page 27 of 118, I count 2, 5, 7, 9 bedrooms, which means, according to the math, 9 parking spots, and we've calculated 7.
Yeah, so speaking with the applicant, they propose to have a caretaker live in one of the suites, so 2 of those bedrooms wouldn't be rented as vacation rentals at this point.
Okay. And we don't require parking,
They would require
For
1
them.
spot.
so that would make it 8 spots. Oh.
Yeah. We have had many conversations about
I'm
this.
sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure this has had many iterations. It's just,
Yeah.
Sure. So 2 on-site spaces are required for the secondary suite and the ADU. 1 each. 1 for the suite and 1 for the ADU. And then another 5 would be required for the vacation rental use at 1 per bedroom. So that is 3 bedrooms in the secondary suite and 2 bedrooms in the proposed ADU. Now the house itself doesn't require any parking spaces because it's like predating parking requirement.
Yeah.
So 2 of the 9 bedrooms would not require parking provision because it's
They're
for a
in the
long-term
house.
resident.
okay. Okay.
They're for a long-term resident.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Clear
And
on
my final question is just lot coverage. There's no mention of whether or not it meets the 40%.
It's really small, but it is on the site plan. It's 34.6%,
Okay.
I think. Sorry, I noticed that today. It's really tiny.
Yeah.
34.3%, and that's
Okay.
from the recent survey just done in February this year.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's a motion there. Would somebody like to read it?
I'll move the councillor for the application for development permit and development variance permit 2022-01 DP and 2022-03 DV for the property described as Lot 1, Block 5, District Lot 21, Nelson District, Plan 522, 3284 2nd Street to the Advisory Planning Commission for a recommendation.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next, recommend that council receive the wastewater upgrade project budget report update for information.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Welcome, Paul. Nice
Good
to have
evening.
you back.
It's great to be back. I had been hoping to come back to Cumberland in the summer, and I still hope to come back here in the summer. But regardless of the weather, the business of the project happens, and so here I am. I had said the last time I would come back with a budget update, which I have of sorts. I hope you've all had a chance to read the report and the project description document. I don't propose to go through the report. I'll try and give as much time for questions, but I'm going to make 2 comments about I guess, philosophy within this. And then we actually have a video to show council about the treatment technology, which I think you'll find quite interesting. So just in terms of the philosophical comments, major change here is that we're not doing another official budget estimate because of where we are. With half of the budget committed, we concluded that to do an official estimate with everything that goes along with it on the remaining part is going to be more energy than what it's worth. And as we proceed here with procuring more things and getting more commitments, the estimate becomes obsolete. And putting it another way, these days, and the estimate that counts is what somebody's prepared to supply it for or build it for. What somebody estimates this should cost is quickly proving to be just an estimate. So that is a change in philosophy. We'd rather wait till we get the real numbers. That wasn't my thinking 6 or even 3 months ago, but it's where we are today, that if we ask for a budget increase based on an estimate, the only thing we know is the estimate will be wrong. So we want to try and get as much of it converted from forecast to committed cost as possible. So that was philosophy point number 1. Philosophy point number 2. The only way we've been able to reduce cost on the project was splitting it into 2 phases. So we've reduced the cost of phase 1 by deferring non-essential things to phase 2. And we've taken that as far as we can. So what's left in phase 1 is everything that we need for either permit compliance or safe, reliable operation. So we've done that part of cost reduction as far as we can, and what we're left now with is cost management by executing it in the most expedient and efficient manner possible. So it's regrettable to say there's no further scope for cost reductions unless we happen to get lucky with suppliers and contractors providing things for less than what we expected. And that's theoretically possible. Right. And it used to happen once. So those are that's really the philosophy behind how this report came to be. So with those statements, I think I'll take questions on the report in just a minute, but if we have a video that we have here about the treatment technology. In the description document at the back, make a reference to surfactant-assisted separation. And we'd always said we would have chemically assisted solids-liquid separation to get the algae and the nutrients out of the water. And surfactant-assisted, or the actual proprietary name, it's called suspended air flotation, or SAF. And it's a variant of a technology used in the mining industry where they would concentrate metal ore by froth flotation. And if you can believe it, you can float lead and gold on froth to the top of a tank and concentrate them. And this technology is similar to that, using bubbles to float stuff, and widely used actually in the food processing industry, but has been applied in wastewater in the US very successfully. And there's a town, which is what the video we're about to show you, that has done it. And for this 3-minute video, I think if you start counting on each finger the number of parallels to Cumberland, you might be forced onto your second hand by the time you get to the end of the video. It's very informative and very applicable to our situation. So I thought it's a good one, along with the project description, to show what it is you're actually buying, and some comfort that what we're trying to do has, with the exception of the extreme wet weather, because this is California, that's the only difference. Otherwise, almost everything we're trying to do, this town is already doing. So.
I serve the District of Grayton as their general manager. I'm a contract general manager. I've worked in the field 37 years. Grayton is a unique environment. It's got beautiful wildlife resources, and it had been run down by the previous management. The people of Grayton decided to take over and form their own special district and revitalize it. They inherited some problems, one of which is Grayton would not be allowed to continue to discharge into the Atascadero Creek. We actually conducted a pilot study here at Grayton, full scale, and we proved to the state that we could get the required removal of algae and bacteria from the water with a SAF to get turbidities down in the 10 range or lower. Pete Lescure and I were working with the district to try to find alternatives to going to this activated sludge or regional system.
With the lead designers on this Grayton wastewater project, I was convinced from the viewpoint of the principals that whereas a DAF, you have to backtrack, recycle 50% of what you're trying to produce, the SAF only has to use 2% of that flow. So that means a whole lot less pumping you're doing. That's a whole lot less material handling you're doing. Smaller pipes to deal with, etc.
The SAF unit takes water from our ponds and adds coagulant to it in this mixing tank and conveys it to the bottom of this SAF unit where a surfactant and air are entrained and cause the algae and bacteria to float to the surface. When they get to the surface, they're collected by this scraper and carried all the way to the end of the SAF unit where they are brought up on a beach. The water drains off and the solids fall into a bin. The bin then is dewatered by gravity and it is composted. People don't always want something new. Do we need to continue with things that were developed in 1911 that are shown to be less efficient than things that are now available in industry? I believe not. And we'd like to show them it's okay.
Amazing number of parallels, even being forced wanting to join a regional system. Yeah. Who knew? So yeah, that the picture at the end there that shows the mechanical equipment, the stainless steel stuff and so on, in sunny California, it's outside, and here in Cumberland, where it is sunny some of the time, but not all the time, it's going to be in a big tent. And that is the sort of heart of the system and also the single most expensive component. But that's the basis of it. One side benefit with that system, it separates the sludge. They put it into that bin where it dewaters enough by gravity that they don't need to use a centrifuge or other mechanical dewatering device. It's a characteristic of that separation system that it dewaters better than normal activated sludge. So one of the things is we don't have to have a centrifuge or other such thing. So there's a cost saving there, but having said that, you can see from the budget numbers that didn't get us out of trouble, but it is creating a benefit in that way. But a lot of parallels, and when I first saw that video, I thought, wow, it's just Cumberland spelt differently. So with that, I'll turn it back to Council and be happy to take any questions you may have about the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kettler.
Thanks. Nice to see you again, Paul. I do have a few questions. One of them is around the end disinfectant that we're using. It's different than what we had proposed originally, peroxide-based, and this one has chlorine in the formula, and I'm wondering if you could explain a bit about that.
The evil chlorine. It's a really good question because at the start, when I first heard this, I thought exactly the same thing. It's like we're trying to avoid chlorine, and chlorine is toxic to fish, and the federal regulations sort of discourage chlorine. So we were originally proposing to use peracetic acid, which is a combination of hydrogen peroxide and acetic acid, and it's used in the food service industry as a disinfectant and actually in wastewater systems in Europe. And one of the things is it's is not toxic to fish and doesn't form chlorinated disinfection byproducts. So a lot of advantages over chlorine. And when we formed the project team this time last year, one of the things we said we would do is review our project plan, which had been basically developed in 2017-18, and just see if we could do any better on any of the things, disinfection being top of the list. Chlorine dioxide is used in the food service industry and in aquaculture and in wastewater in Europe and in also pulp and paper as a disinfectant. And what I didn't know is it acts by a completely different chemical pathway. So there's chlorine in there, but it acts differently to the chlorine in bleach, which is effectively what we'd be using for normal chlorination. It does not form chlorinated disinfection byproducts like normal chlorine, and at the end of the disinfection process you neutralize it by just aerating the water. And it turns out it is used in aquaculture as a disinfectant for fish tanks and all sorts of things like that. Good indication of its fish friendliness. So it contains chlorine, but it's not chlorine as we normally think of it. And there is one wastewater plant in Quebec that's using it. There's a few others in the States, and it's widely used in Europe. So an innovative idea that I was not aware of. Maybe it's not even innovative if it's been that widely used. We also looked at ozone, which achieves many of the same things, although it will oxidize other things in the water. But it effectively doesn't have toxic byproducts either, but expensive and complicated. So we ended up with a horse race between parasitic and chlorine dioxide, and chlorine dioxide came out to be the winner. Slightly better technical performance, slightly better on avoiding byproducts, and basically about the same cost and operational complexity.
Okay, so just to be sure, it's no more toxic to aquatic life than the
No,
parasitic.
parasitic.
Yeah, okay.
And equally toxic to norovirus, which is the concern for the aquatic life,
Okay.
or one of the concerns.
Great, thank you. And so right now we're just on budget. We're not on budget.
No.
So right now we are around 300,000 over. Is that
6.
okay? 600,000 over, and that's just for that's without our contractors' labor. Is that correct?
All we've got, yes, in the way we've broken up the budget currently, we have 2.5 million allocated to construction services, which would be, literally all the contractors. So we have equipment and construction services. So the equipment, we've already placed purchase orders for the major stuff, and we have a reasonable idea of what the other ones cost. For construction services, for now, we're just putting it at that budget, and we will fill in the lines on that blue table as the things come in. So it's back to that game of any estimates we make are too wild guesses to be reliable. So yes, we are tracking to be over budget, but exactly how much over, we will have a better idea as the tenders actually come back.
And this is just phase 1.
Phase 1.
So we do have phase 2 to deal with.
Yep.
But you did mention something about a grant, possibly?
So yes, so for phase 2, just before I get onto the grant, with phase 2, of course, it's the reed bed, the wetland, the stormwater wetland, the habitat enhancement, the creek hydraulic works. It's almost opposite of phase 1 in that it is almost all going to be construction services, and there's very little stuff that we buy for it. We'll have to buy biochar for the reed bed, otherwise it's all digging and moving things and so on. So as a project, it'll behave differently. And we have another grant opportunity, the gas tax grant, and it was actually suggested to us by the province that we apply for this one in parallel with the funding opportunity back in February. And gas tax maximum of $6 million, and it will fund a larger number of smaller projects. And the fund we applied to, Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, the way it's playing out, it is probably going to award to a smaller number of larger projects. So basically we were told, you've probably got a better chance with this one. Doesn't mean we withdraw our other application, but they suggested we apply to this. And obviously, if we're successful, and because it's administered by UBCM instead of the feds, decisions are probably going to be faster, then we would withdraw the other application. So I'm working on that, and we'll come back next council meeting in 2 weeks' time with the submission. I probably won't be here in person for that one, but yeah, since we've already done all of the work, it's easy to make this application.
Right.
And I'm excited about that because I love applying for money.
We are glad you do that.
Love it when you apply for money too. Thanks, Paul.
Okay. Councillor Brown?
Thanks, Paul. The video was very interesting. And I'm just wondering how that might, so the other difference between the two communities is that one's in California and it doesn't rain there. And as we know now, it rains here pretty much all the time. So would that still work with the increase of stormwater? And
For that technology will, but one thing that hasn't changed is our objective is only to treat a certain amount of the flow through the post-lagoon treatment. Right, so when we have the extreme wet weather, a portion of the flow, the majority of it, has to bypass that treatment. It will still get disinfection. It goes through the lagoons and gets disinfection and out. The first part of the flow goes through the lagoons. We'll get the separation treatment. And in the future, when we have tertiary filters in there, we'll get the filtration. So it would be possible to get very large units that can handle those peak flows, but then, of course, they're oversized for the everyday flows. So that was always our conundrum with whatever the post-lagoon treatment was, sizing it by a factor of 4 times for those peak flows means it's oversized and either inefficient operation, or else it's just that it's way oversized and expensive accordingly. So otherwise, for the conditions, the water conditions we have, we've given them all of the information on what we have and the temperatures, etc., and that does fine. That technology is in the food service industry, does a lot of very high strength wastewater, and in some other applications it's done very low strength, and it appears to be equally effective all around. So we're quite excited about it.
Okay, and then I guess to follow that, so as we reduce our, or continue to separate our storm from sewer, then we won't have so many going around. Okay.
We will have fewer of them, and they will be smaller in size.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Okay. I think all my other questions were asked and answered.
Councillor Sutherland?
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Nice to see you again. So the original grant, I guess that was 2019, 2020?
The original grant was, we applied in 2018 and was awarded in 2019.
So those 2019 dollars are now almost useless. Is there any conversation on their end about COVID and the 2-year gap and the fact that everything's twice as much?
There's a conversation about the 2-year gap in terms of if we need an extension of time to the federal funding, which goes till March 2024, we would almost certainly get one, no questions asked. However, there's no conversation about getting more money. That's just the way it is. We're fortunate in the way we're tracking. If we go from 9.7 million to 10.7 million, for example, I think that I would say we've actually dodged a bullet given what other places are experiencing with all sorts of projects. So we're lucky that we're actually close to track, but there has been no talk about giving more money.
Okay, thanks. And just a question about the video 10 range. What is that in Canadian parlance?
I think he actually said turbidity of 10, but I think what he actually meant was suspended solids. That water, just looking at it, the turbidity was probably 1 or 2. Like turbidity is a measure normally used in drinking water or high quality reclaimed water. So I think he meant the TSS, total suspended solids, as being 10 or lower, and that's our performance target too. And for California, their reclaimed water target says suspended solids of 10 or lower. So that's, yeah, I'd noticed that one. Turbidity's not quite. But you could see how clear the water was coming out of there. So it's doing a very good job on an algae-loaded lagoon. And summer there, it would have been as warm as what it was during the heat dome here last year. So it's good to see it performs under those conditions.
So thanks. Just looking forward to starting this project.
Councillor Sproul?
Yes, Councillor Brown mentioned it about the summer and winter flows. Some of them extra flows are necessary for putting water into the Trent River. So
The best way I can put that, in summer, all the water that we treat, and that's the low flow period, we want it to go back into the Trent River. It's going to go via the wetlands and so on, but it all ends up in the Trent River. In winter, as we do more storm sewer separation and control infiltration and all that sort of thing, it just means all that water still goes into the Trent River, it just doesn't go via the lagoons. So yeah, the Dunsmuir Avenue Stormwater Project sends it via the Dunsmuir Avenue outfall, I guess. So it always goes into the Trent River. We just don't want the rainwater through the treatment plant. So at the moment, the ratio of peak winter flow to summer dry weather flow is 16 to 1 or even 20 to 1. Right, and the normal target is 2 or 3 to 1. Metro Vancouver averages about 3 to 1. As our long-term goal here is to get it down to 4 to 1, and that will happen as we reduce infiltration, but also our projections here that the village doubles in 20 years. So your base flow is coming up and your excess flow is coming down, and we plan on being at 4 to 1 in the future. However, key point is the way we design this, with the post-lagoon treatment, it'll handle the current flow and the current dry weather flow, a doubling of population. The way we've got the auxiliary disinfection for handling the peak winter flows, that will end up being overbuilt as those peak flows come down in the future. That part is fine with chemical disinfection. You can simply reduce the dose to maintain performance. So we've oversized the one component, the auxiliary disinfection, that is easy to oversize and easy to adjust your performance for the flow. The hardcore treatment, like what was shown in the video, we've had to right size that, and it'll handle our current and future growth just right. And no matter which way we do it, all the water always ends up in the Trent River.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Paul. It's always a pleasure to have you here explaining the issues to us.
Thank you. If I may make one more comment, since nobody asked me about it, there was a thing at the very end of the report about a groundbreaking ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
yes.
if we were to do that today, I'd call it a mud breaking ceremony. But it is something that we will try to look to do in probably in August. Key point being while this council is still this council, because by the time there's a municipal election, we will have actually broken ground, other than tree clearing. So that's something we'll work with staff here on sorting out an actual date for that. But yeah, right now though, it'd be very easy to drive a shovel into that ground because it's pretty soft.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next, that council received the report request for joint bid to host 55 plus BC games.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Thanks, everybody. So yeah, you've seen the report, hopefully. Little brief summary. So this was an initiative that was brought forward by the City of Campbell River, and it's primarily, well, the City of Campbell River and the CVRD are sort of the two large components of it, but they need the buy-in from the local Comox Valley municipalities, and it's mostly just around the provision of in-kind resources, recreation facilities to host the various sports. So the original request was for a joint bid for either the 2024, 2025, or 2026 games. Upon conversation, we decided 2024 was too short of a runway, so we've put forward either 2025 or 2026. The games take place over 4 days in either August or September, and we would propose September, I think, as a first choice. We, as in the village, would be, we'd expect to host between 1 or 3 sports out of a minimum of 20 that are needed to host the games. Possibly an accreditation center, like for volunteers and stuff to check in as well, but that's all to be determined. In terms of financial impact of it, again, it's primarily a little bit of, it's in-kind resources and it's some staff support. The in-kind resources we anticipate would be less than $2,000 from the village, maybe up to maybe $2,400 if we have the accreditation center, just in terms of what we would normally rent those facilities out as. Based on estimated participation, that's based on past participation and studies that have been put forward by the BC Senior Game Society, it's estimated that our communities, CVRD, Campbell River, all of us, could see up to $3 million in local economic impact. Now, obviously, the impact of the village would be scaled proportionally. Operationally, we expect that this would be manageable for staff. We did have some initial concerns that we would be expected to sit on an organizing committee and take on more of an organizational role. I've expressed that concern, that would be a concern. Everyone else at the table is under the exact same understanding that we are, that we're basically liaising with the organizing committee, providing the venues, and we've also confirmed that at the Victoria Games this year, there's no municipal staff on the committee. So yeah, we don't have any major concerns about that anymore. I think that's kind of my gist. So all that considered, we are recommending that council support our participation in the joint bid, but obviously open to any questions or comments you might have.
Was there any word or discussion about volunteers? Will people from the community be able to volunteer for these events?
There are a lot of volunteers. I don't have the specific numbers but there's a lot of volunteer opportunities. I don't know the details of what that would look like, but that would be sorted out by the organizing committee.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any questions? No? So go ahead.
I move that council support a joint application bid with the City of Campbell River and Comox Valley Regional District to host the 2025 or 2026 British Columbia 55+ Games, subject to support from the City of Courtenay and the Town of Comox to ensure that there are enough venues for a competitive bid, and further, that if a bid is successful, Village of Cumberland commit to the games by providing in-kind support of facilities and services to support the Comox Valley cumulative in-kind contribution of $55,000 with joint host support to be commensurate to the size of the village.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you
you.
very much. That council receive the Union of BC Municipalities Conference Cabinet Minister Meetings Report.
No receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Thank you, Council. It's that time of year again where Council, who I believe all members are attending UBCM conference this September, have the opportunity to make requests to meet cabinet ministers on particular topics that are important to the Cumberland community. And in the, these requests have to be submitted by June 24th. So we've got a bit of time, but not too long to get the requests in. And in the report, you'll see some suggestions from staff on some discussion that council has had in the past months. And those suggestions are the topics of development financing through development cost charges and a request to expand the opportunities there for municipalities. The second suggestion is the expansion of the Watershed Security Fund to apply to private managed forest lands. And a third suggestion is affordable housing for small communities. Of course, council members are absolutely entitled to have a discussion on what council's priorities are, and staff request a direction by resolution to make those requests. And one other thing I should mention, we often identify the cabinet minister for a particular topic, and we find after we look through the meeting book that it's actually it falls under a different department or a ministry. So perhaps a focus on the topic, and then staff can go ahead and make sure that we get the right right cabinet minister for those topics.
So let's go around the table and see who you would like to speak to. Would like to go first? Anybody? Does anybody have any thoughts? I would certainly like to see talk to BC Housing and affordable housing for small communities.
I think that would be a priority.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
Number one.
And we might want to connect with SD 71 and see if we need to advocate for the expansion.
I did speak to Trustee Howe about that, and she said yes.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Definitely.
I don't think it's on the list yet. What I also was thinking about the Watershed Security Fund, but it's under the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. But I think we also could meet with, we should maybe do both, the land, water, and resource stewardship regarding watershed, the same thing we always talk to them about. Well, it's a new ministry, so it'll be completely different. And then the Watershed Security Fund being used to purchase lands in the watershed.
The three that they are recommending, our staff.
Yeah, but adding the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, because he's responsible for the Watershed Security Fund. So doing those tandem, right?
Okay.
Meeting with land and water and talking to them about it, and also doing Minister of Environment.
Okay. And I know we're getting our DC report, our DCC report, and that's one of the recommendations that we go and see them.
And
Development cost charges.
I was going to say in the very last one, 2017, the liquid waste management planning. Is there any way I know we've moved through a whole phase, but can we still get funding if would environment and climate change?
The people would be to see would be the grant that we will be applying for is through UBCM.
Okay.
Okay. So any further discussions? And we can put them down, and if we chose not to go, that would be good. If we find an alternative or something, but at this point, because we have to, there's a lot of prep work involved in this for staff. So is everybody fine? Councillor Kettler, was there something
Yeah, I'm
else?
happy with staff's suggestions around the DCCs, the Water Security Fund, and affordable housing. As Councillor Sullivan said, I think, definitely number one is the affordable housing. I also agree, I had on my list the Minister of Children and Families or Education and Childcare, sorry, for the daycare center. I think we could say that it's a thanks, and then just slip in there the
budget
additional request for money that
Bait and
Yes.
switch.
that SD 71.
Great. Give us more.
Yeah, well, I've found over the years, it's not always going and asking, it's also letting them know what's going on.
Yeah.
And they really like to hear what we are doing, and
And they like to hear thank yous, so that's,
yes,
that's good.
yes.
Seeing faces is good too.
I was wondering though about, because we now have the Ministry of Land and Water Resource Stewardship, and then the Ministry of Forests is kind of off on its own, that maybe we should familiarize ourselves with that minister, and because a lot of the issues we have with private managed forests now land there, and so it'd probably be good to let them know who we are and what our concerns are, but it might be too much for one event. I don't know.
And I'm wondering about maybe like a joint maybe that's a joint presentation because there are other local governments here that are also concerned about private managed forest land and watersheds, and we all share that watershed. So maybe that would be more powerful. You know, we talked about getting all the mayors together before, and so maybe
One of the things that
collaboration.
they generally have about 90 meetings each ministry, and sometimes it's better for them to hear individually from each one of those communities if we're all saying the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that could work too. Just that collaboration on what we're bringing to those.
And we could actually send off an email to the communities that have private managed forests and tell them that we hope that they're going to go and speak to their, and which I assume they all are, about the private managed forests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be really powerful to have however many 20 communities from up and down the island sit in the
I will say
meeting.
that after going to those meetings for 7 years, that maybe that would be a different tack, and show
Yeah.
up with 30 of us in a room and say, hey, it's time to fix the Comox Valley.
Generally, they don't have enough room for that many people in their offices.
Maybe standing lonely would be a little bit intimidating for them, and they finally do something. Who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah.
I just think an alternate approach might be.
Yeah.
I feel like that's
How
something
much
like
time is it that we get with each one?
10 minutes.
I believe it's 10 minutes. Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Okay. Yeah.
There's all
Well,
the
what we
buildings,
could
say
do
3
is to
words
make
and
the
get it.
appointment and then invite all of them to come. But they would have to be given the information, the minister would have to be told that that's what we're
Right.
doing. We can't surprise them.
And we've had group meetings for other things before, and it gets a little bit, because you only have 10 minutes.
Yes.
And then you have all these different communities, they don't get really a voice within that meeting. So that, I mean, it's great to speak with that unified voice, but it might actually be better just to repeat the message among those communities instead of the minister gets to get rid of like all of these
Everybody at
communities
once.
at once after 10 minutes,
All
right?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Ice-T is going to be taking that approach. And we're going to have a discussion about that too.
Ice-T is taking what approach? Sorry.
That every community goes and talks to the ministers.
Right. So again, that collaboration before the
Yes.
meeting,
Yeah.
regardless whether
Yeah.
we do it together or whether we.
Yeah. Actually, the time before when we did it with Ice-T, we were told, Lynn came around and told us to stop. They'd heard loud and clear. It was quite an interesting day. Anyway, so you've got the list, Rachel?
Could I just ask for clarification on the request to the land, water, and resource stewardship on the watershed, and what was the?
That's
General-
private managed forest. That's,
It was about the private managed forest. land,
yes,
right?
that's her
Okay.
with the watershed.
Okay.
So drinking water.
And that's Josie Osborne, RMLA.
Okay. Great. Thank you. So should I read them out and just have
Yes.
confirmation? So first priority is BC housing for small communities, affordable housing. School District 71 to advocate for the school expansion. The Watershed Security Fund. Private managed forest land impact on watersheds. Children and families for the Child Care Center funding.
Well, that would be the same because it's now, remember now it's Ministry of Education and Childcare. They're all one.
Yes, they are.
Okay. So the two topics in one meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Minister of Forests to introduce yourselves and express the private managed forest land concerns. I think that was it.
Okay.
Okay.
Everybody fine?
I wonder if there's an opportunity. So I'm still not fully understanding BC Assessment's response to us on the rate, the forest rate, and maybe that's a topic also for the Minister of Forests. I have no idea who would set that. Would it be the Minister of Forests? And I don't think so.
No, it would be BC Assessment that makes the decisions.
But they said it comes from the province. So who in the province?
If we have time after this, I can touch base with BC Assessment and find out, because it is a different branch where they
Yeah.
get prescribed what they're to assess. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
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 We'll get into that one.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay.
Even if it's not the Ministry of Forest that does it, they should be able to explain it to us.
Yes.
Yes.
Should, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll move along then.
Thank you.
That council receive the appointment of election officers report.
Move receipt. Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Okay, thank you, Council. So I'm sure everyone's aware we have a local general election coming up in October. And the Local Government Act requires that every local government appoint a chief election officer and a deputy chief election officer to conduct the election. Our practice has been, Council's practice in the past has been to appoint the corporate officer. It's in my job description, so I don't think I can get out of it. But Council does have the choice to make other appointments, of course. So also the practice has been to appoint the CAO as the deputy chief election officer, and the role of the deputy is just to act in case the chief is unable to act on voting day and assist the presiding officer at the voting place. So, and we have, we're recommending that Kevin McFedrin be appointed as the deputy for the election.
Sounds good.
So, someone make the motion?
That council appoint Rachel Parker as chief election officer and Kevin McFedrin as deputy chief election officer for the 2022 general local election.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Lots of side jobs, Kevin. Okay, next is council reports. My report is there. There's just a couple I'd like to speak about. And one was, we had a meeting with Mosaic out in the forest, and staff and council attended, and I think it was a very productive day, and we had the opportunity to discuss many of the logging practices that they were using up on in our watershed area. Yes. The next one was Minister Nathan Collin and Minister Katrina Conroy, and I attended their meeting. And one of the things that they told us that we should be getting is there's an app out for BC Wildfire Service public mobile app, and anybody can get it. I got it myself, and it talks about all the emergencies that are going on, especially wildfires, and so you would be able to get up-to-date information on that app whenever there's a fire in or around your area. I also attended the emerging future of primary care in the Comox Valley. It was a day-and-a-half workshop, and we went and made presentations, and we actually made our presentation 9 times to different groups of providers in the Comox Valley. It was very interesting to hear what's going on in the rest of the valley under healthcare. There was probably about 70 people in attendance, and doctors, nurses, all kinds of organizations present and talking about the different projects. It was really quite interesting to attend. And then, of course, we get into the events celebration for the May 24th, and that was an exceptional weekend. It was a lot of work, a lot of volunteers, and we actually had nice weather. So it was very nice. After the May Queen luncheon, I had a meeting with our MP Gord Johns and MLA Josie Osborne, and it was to update on village projects in the village. But also, Gord Johns wanted to talk about Bill C-216 and his disappointment at it, that it not being passed. But he also wanted to thank council and he was thanking us for the letter that we wrote in support of Bill C-216, and the response that he got from other municipalities in BC, it is what made it really a viable option to what's happening now, even though he was disappointed that it didn't come out the way he had hoped to. I think it has taken us a step further, and I commend him for all the work that he did on behalf of the people of BC on this topic. And I really do hope that it does make a difference. And if anybody has any questions about my report, please don't hesitate to ask. Yes.
Just to follow up on the bill that Gord Johns was working on, that people may not know that it didn't pass nationally, but that the federal government did allow BC an exemption to the criminal code to allow for possession of small amounts of illicit drugs, and that is going to help with basically the way people are helped during an emergency. A lot of times people feel like they can't call if somebody is in trouble because they've had some kind of toxic drug event. They can't call police or emergency services because of the implication of criminal activity. So this will help save a lot of lives. And it'll also help with a lot of the discrimination that people feel as drug user and being looked at as a criminal issue as opposed to a health issue. So yeah, Gord's been great, and I think there's still an opportunity that it could be applied nationally if we have this pilot in BC and it works out well. It could spread to the rest of the country and save a lot of people's lives. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I was in for Councillor Kettler at the Regional District Board, where there's a pretty hardy hearth industry conversation. The CVRD has come out with their wood smoke reduction strategy, which is starting to really educate some folks. The hearth industry had some difficulties with it. The RD is going to go away and come back with a report again. There was just some updates on the Comox First Nation Treaty. They're saying it's going to be another 3 or 4 years, but that it will finalize at that point, so that's pretty good. The May Days, once again, the best weekend of the year in Cumberland. At least it didn't rain the whole time. That was pretty nice. Had an incident to talk to Director Arbor about some sporting issues. He is the chair of the Sports and Rec Commission. And I'd mentioned to him an idea that I had just my friends who we had started the Cumberland Cup, which was in June, and I'd mentioned that, and that was possible an idea for some seed funding for an idea to maybe have an outdoor rink that stays frozen in the valley for the winter, and he suggested that I write a letter, so I did that. So I think tomorrow that'll be talked about, and maybe float an idea about another ice rink surface in the Comox Valley that could be possibly supported by the RD, which would be really helpful for our community. That's basically the main stuff. Called bingo again for the CCSS. It's nice to see that bingo is in person again. So anybody needs their bingo on, get down there on Wednesdays to the Legion. Thanks.
So I thought maybe you'd be taking up another job in the fashion industry.
Oh, I didn't mention that on purpose. Thank
Vogue
you.
hasn't called you?
No.
Really?
No, it was my second modeling gig in 20 years. So it was, the fashion show was very fun, and I would suggest that anybody looking for fun would go to that next year for sure.
Great. And I agree with you about the outdoor ice rink. I think it would be absolutely amazing because we saw that. Where was it that we saw the outdoor rink? Was that?
Well, I didn't see an outdoor rink personally, but I did at the trade show in Ottawa and with
Yes.
the 150th.
Yeah.
They had some people there, and they provide the rink, they provide the membrane that folds out, And 7 years ago, it was $10,000 for 5 months worth of hydro. So that's now probably 80,000.
Yeah.
Solar. It's a solar powered.
Right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's 7 years since then. There's probably new things happening. So I think that compared to a brand new building or an extension onto the existing buildings for a sheet of ice is probably $20 million. And something like this would fall less than 2 or 1.5, I think. So
Yeah, one of the areas they could look at is Bevan Park in Nanaimo. They have one, an outdoor rink like that.
And and just the fact
Yeah.
that there's so less skating surfaces, and I know that Cumberland's very excited when it freezes in the swamp, and everybody rushes down to skate.
It would be safer than on the swamp. Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Can I just add, that it's a good time to bring it forward as the Sports Commission, the Regional Sports Commission, looking at ice allocation, and they've there's a lot of demand for ice time, especially at prime time. So having another playing surface for the valley is pretty desirable. Yeah.
Yes, it would be. Okay. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, what shall I highlight? So yeah, the tour with Mosaic was interesting. I did get verbal confirmation that they do not spray pesticides in our watershed or on any of the lands that they are logging or managing here. So that's great. Lots of climate committee meetings going through all the new funding, and I don't remember what it's called, the replacement for CARUP, but those climate grants, I assume staff has seen them or being involved with those webinars on how to get that money. The long weekend was amazing, and it was really nice to see everyone, and I think that's it.
Oh, I was going to ask you about the meeting to discuss securing future CCSS space.
Yes, so the school is planning an expansion, and the board in the past had made some sort of motion around ensuring that the community school would have space allocated in that new, not necessarily in that new area, but that it would remain a critical piece of the school. And I think Sue just wanted to get some support with how to move forward with that. So I believe she has had a follow-up meeting with Ian, and yeah, I haven't heard back after that, but yeah, not for the food share, just for the
Okay, thank you.
Other operations.
Councillor Kettler?
Thank you. So quite a few things this month, but what's sort of pertinent to council is the May 24th CVRD board meeting. We discussed the Regional Parks and Trails Service, and staff gave an overview of that, and the board asked for the bylaw to be prepared. So the bylaw is coming to tomorrow's board meeting, and it's proposed that it'll go through to third reading, and once that happens, a letter will be sent out to the municipalities, to the participating municipalities, and we can then decide where we go from there. There's still some outstanding issues for Comox. They had written a letter asking about veto rights, and they're wanting to have Comox and one other jurisdiction to have veto right. So that is proposed to have what's called a supermajority, but it wouldn't necessarily be Comox and another jurisdiction. Any participating jurisdiction could participate in the supermajority to have a veto right. So we'll see how that goes over tomorrow night. I actually forgot that May had 31 days, and and failed to put in the last CRD board meeting that we had, which was all on climate, and some good climate initiatives coming forward, including so trying to capture community emissions and working with industry to do that. We talked about the new replacement for the Care Up funding, which looks quite good. It's I don't know, I think it works out to maybe 4 times as much money as we were getting through the other programs. So that's really good, and a much broader spectrum of uses toward climate initiatives for that money. So that's good. We also talked about the possibility of doing on-demand transit pilot, but we are waiting on BC Transit. They had a similar pilot in northern BC somewhere that they didn't really like, it sounded like. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out for us, but there's definitely support at the board for doing that. And also staff are going to be bringing back some information on a bike sharing program, an e-bike sharing program for the region as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Sproul. Sorry, I missed you.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so there's a Zumba bus in Powell River. It's not
Zunga.
operating. Zunga, sorry. Zunga, I don't know. It's a bright yellow bus, and was a pilot as well. Apparently they don't have a driver right now. But so
Yes.
there's one even closer that maybe is more likable. I don't know whether we
Yeah.
go back to them and say, what about this
Just
one?
Talking to Councillor Leishman this morning, who was saying that they couldn't find enough drivers to drive this bus. So the labor shortage is hitting this, even though the pilot's going well in every other way.
Yeah.
And fun fact, Zunga just means rope swing. In Powell River, that's what we call rope swings.
And it's a bus because it's just a fun word. And if
Yeah.
you make up a word, you want to use it for things.
Yeah.
But you mentioned in there, you mentioned in your reports, I think a meeting with Fortis about the
Yeah. So
the landfill. What,
yeah.
Did you get
so
anywhere
it's been stalled out, and it's kind of, I don't want to put them on the hot seat away, but there's a lot of reason on their end for the stall, but it seems like it's going to be going forward. So yeah.
Okay, so what I just heard from the I can't remember the full name, CEA. Anyway, and at the Climate Leadership Institute was that lots of people had planned to capture methane from their landfill and instead are burning it because there's not enough there to make it useful.
Right.
And I know we all have a million plans for what might come out of that landfill in terms of that gas. So are they going to tell us about that or?
Yeah, I mean the composition issue, I think that was always there. Like they know that it needs to be cleaned up and it only lasts so long per cell and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that they've figured those issues out. Yeah.
Okay. Now, Councillor Sproul.
It's a short report, although a lot of time was taken up with Empire Days. Lots of fun. The children's races, you don't hear too much about them, but my kids were always very, very keen to be involved, and the cousins from Edmonton. It's kids, I think it's perhaps because they get $2, a $2 coin. I got that from my grandson. It means so much. So I hope that doesn't get dropped, that event. Simple, the old sack races, etc. The other thing that my family got totally involved with, I don't know if I got the Cumbie, that foot race. Everybody in my family except me, I went to watch, but was involved because it could be chopped in half. It was a full one, or a half one, or a quarter one. So anyway, and then that day I saw you with the street hockey tournament. And there was also a women's enduro mountain bike. It's just like, how many things can you pack in to that village park? But anyway, it happens, and so that's good. I also went with Mosaic Timber to look at our water supply. It sure looks like a lot of trees are coming down. I mean, not there particularly, just the general landscape behind Cumberland now. Lot of cutting going on. Oh, yeah, so I'm just trying to think of his name, Dave. One of the naturalists, a member of Comox Valley Naturalists, he lives in the village, but he mentions it quite often to me when work is going on, like at the wastewater treatment center. He said, could we keep activities low because of at nesting time? Because a lot of birds are nesting out there at the lagoons, and it's something we haven't factored in our timing. I'm not sure whether we can factor it in with that, but it is something to bring into our...
Kevin has his hand on the mic already.
Yeah, that was factored in. There was, because we were outside the typical nesting window, so a bird nest survey was done in advance. That was coordinated before any falling, and the monitoring happened. So we are factoring that in as a new practice.
Good. Did the fellow phone you? I was trying to encourage him.
I don't think I spoke with a resident. This is something that Tyler helped. He may have. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But yeah, helped coordinate.
Yeah, just to let you know, Councillor, the kids' races on May Day are put on by the rec department.
Oh, all right.
And have for years. They have participated in those races.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah. Okay, can I have a motion to receive the reports?
So moved.
All in favor? Carried. Next, we're going into bylaws. That council received the June 3rd, 2022 report, vacation rental regulations, bylaw amendment options.
Receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So it's amazing what months of discussion look like when it's in a bylaw. A few lines. Very elegant. So yeah, this report introduces Bylaw 1170 to amend the existing vacation rental regulations in the zoning bylaws. So it's an amendment to the zoning bylaw. And then also Bylaw 1171 to add new regulations for vacation rental businesses to the business licensing bylaw. And just have a few little things to draw your attention to. So one is just an additional amendment that was not discussed before with council or the advisory committees. Through the legal review, we discovered that there's some incompatibility potentially between vacation rental and one of the home occupations that are permitted on properties, which is childcare. Due to the provincial requirements for childcare of criminal record checks for anyone living on the property that's older than 12 years of age, operating a vacation rental would seem to conflict with that. So the zoning amendment bylaw includes a provision that the two cannot coexist on the same property. And then I have a couple little formatting changes I'll draw your attention to now so I don't forget them, and they're there for the record, and we can make them without a resolution, I understand, from the corporate officer. But Bylaw 1170, under the new definition for vacation rental, dwelling unit should be italicized because it has a definition associated with it. And then following F, there should be a G, vacation rental must not be operated on a property that has a daycare use. It's lumped in with the previous paragraph. It's tidier if it's separate. And then one other small one is under 5.5 vacation rental signs. Under A, the sign shall only be in the physical form of a fascia sign rather than or a fascia sign. So I just wanted to fix those 3 things for the record. And then just get into a couple other things. So one of the key things that we wanted to bring, one of the things that came up and you will receive there was 3 questions submitted for a question period that also relate to the bylaws, and just to be sure that there is a good understanding what they do. There may just be a bit of confusion about that. There was a question of whether we now the council is now restricting vacation rentals to the R1A zone. As we know through the process, they've always been permitted only in the R1A zone, plus the 2 spot zone properties on Dunsmuir Avenue and in the RE1, the recreation tourism zone. So that's not changing. Where they're currently permitted, it is not changing. That also means that vacation rentals are operating in a different area than those 3 would not be lawful non-conforming. So even if they've operated before all the regulations come into place, and if the bylaws are adopted, there's no lawful non-conforming status if they're operating currently outside of the permitted zones, because that is not changing. The boundaries are not changing. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then just another technical items. The other question was whether council could seek amendments to the bylaw after the public hearing, and you can, as long as it doesn't affect use or density. So it can be some amendments after the public hearing if desired. And then I finally want to draw your attention briefly to the enforcement discussion. So we did want to give you an idea of what enforcement might require. This is just initial cut at that, and our recommendation is to discuss this further as part of your review of your bylaw enforcement policy. And then if proactive enforcement is supported by council, then you can get more into the financial impact of what that would mean. So what I provided here is just to give you a first cut at that, so you can contemplate that until the actual discussion on this item. And that's based on a review of AirDNA, which captures the listings of vacation rentals and has a definition for active. Like if any particular property listed once in a previous month, they considered active. So we had 62 active listings in the past month, and we have 20 vacation rental business licenses, either existing or in progress. They applied before the moratorium was put in place. So that means we possibly have about 42 that are non-compliant. It could be a few more as July rolls around, but that kind of gives you an idea on I based my estimate of staff time on that. And then we just learned today that the province is considering policy to require the online platforms that list vacation rentals to report and share with local government data about where they're located, following privacy requirements, all that. So that would actually help with the enforcement and might reduce the effort or private detective work required. So yeah, I think that's all I wanted to cover. Yeah, if there's any questions.
Any questions from members of council? Do you want to go around the table? Councillor Spruill?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I should have started with Councillor Brown.
It's okay, go ahead.
Sorry, what was I going to say? Oh, it seems like a lot of hours of work of staff to enforce if we wish to. Because generally in the past, don't we only go after people who isn't it complaint driven? I'm just wondering how many people will be involved in and how we will decide if people are operating a bed and breakfast without business license. It's going to be tough, is what I'm saying.
To Mayor and Council, yeah, correct. It does take some effort. So that's for you to consider and discuss when you review your bylaw enforcement policy. Currently, you're correct, it's complaint based. For anything that relates to zoning bylaw
currently it can be enforced proactively. So I tried to give you an idea of what it might entail, and it's really, I had this discussion with the bylaw enforcement officer. It's based on his experience that among this a certain number, and he gave me some percentages. There's a certain number of people that will comply right away when you contact them, and did they know, or maybe they thought it wasn't a big deal or whatever. They wouldn't get caught. Others, maybe require a little bit more back and forth, and then of course, if there's detective work to be done to figure out where the place actually is, that requires effort. And then really, what takes the most amount of time is then if you get defiance and someone just won't comply, and if you go beyond your ticketing ability. And you have to actually seek a court order, and that takes a lot of time. But that would come back to council for decision in any event. So that's something to consider, yeah.
And just one other question, does Courtney and Comox have similar issues?
So my understanding is that they have not, they updated their vacation rental bylaws at this point. I think they're starting to look at that. They still officially not permitting them as a commercial use of a private residence. When I looked at this, last Cumberland was the only jurisdiction that actually had vacation rental regulations. The other jurisdictions just don't permit them, but may or may not have actively enforced. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, just to be really clear, the estimates in Karen's report are for a proactive enforcement of vacation rentals. That's why they're so high. So that would be something for council to consider.
Okay. Councillor Selwyn.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm not totally ready to let our bylaw loose proactively necessarily, but yeah, I guess that's part of the process here. I wasn't sure that we landed on a definite sign necessary, that the signs, I thought that was still up in the air, and I'm not sure that I support that actually. Just there was some pretty good conversation about privacy regarding signs and stuff like that, so I'm still not totally convinced that a sign outside is necessary, especially if online and they have a business license stuff, so I just have some issues with that. But that's it.
Okay. Councillor Brown?
Thank you, and thanks again, Karen, for all your work on this. It does seem to be small in relation to the amount of pre-work, so much appreciated. And I'm hoping that that our residents are going to, once they become aware, do the right thing, and that we won't need a bunch of enforcement, but I do think we need to plan for enforcement for some of them. I don't see parking, and I don't remember what we did with it. Is it assumed in there somewhere that there's one spot for each bedroom, or did we decide to talk about that later?
It says 3 on page 104.
It says limited to 3 bedrooms.
So under the business, that's in the business license amendment bylaw, number 1171, so that's page 113 of your package, under 2V1 I6. It's just reads comply with the village's parking requirements.
Right, but it doesn't say what their requirements are.
No.
Because they're already there.
That's right. So we're proposing to continue what we have currently, which was 1 parking space per bedroom.
Okay.
Bedroom.
Okay. Thanks.
Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, thanks. It looks good. I missed the last meeting as I was caring for my parents, so I didn't get to really contribute on that, but I agree with what council has come out with. As far as the signs, we had always talked about making sure that there was a number for people to call, because even if there was somebody living on site, that person doesn't necessarily have to be the caretaker, so there does need to be a phone number for people to be able to address any issues that arise out of that business occurring in a residential neighborhood. I was wondering though, so you were saying we have 62 active listings, and only 22 business licenses to date. If those 40-odd listings are outside of the R1A, how are we planning on approaching those people that are currently operating a business but not within the zoning that we've put forward?
Yeah, I mean, the first step in enforcement is usually making sure you communicate the updates to your regulations. I mean, even this helps, and then the public hearing helps, because every time this comes to the council, there is often a news article related to that in the public hearing. But then once they've been adopted, there should be some communication going out about the updated regulations. That's usually the first step in the process. We haven't actually discussed what that will look like, but we have the email newsletter that goes out, and we can put an ad in the paper, so we'll give some thought to that.
And how did staff feel about the proactive enforcement? Do you think that, so we're establishing this, we're trying to get the information out there. Is it better to have proactive enforcement and probably hire more bylaw to do that for the first while, and then maybe go back to a complaint based after this has been established? Or
I think it's important to discuss it. Of course, bylaws do work better if they're actively enforced, especially when you're putting something new in place. That might be a bit difficult. I do know, Tofino did do quite a bit of enforcement there, bigger in terms of their tourism potential, so they had quite a lot more. I wasn't too surprised with the number that I arrived at with reviewing it with the bylaw enforcement officer. I think the move up the province making is positive. That might help with the bylaw enforcement and reduce the effort. So I think this is a really great time to be working on this. And once your review comes up, I think will hopefully have some better estimates for you and financial impact. It helps when you first put some new rules in place, but it has to be weighed against the other things that you might want to enforce against. So I think it's good to have it as a part of the bigger discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm fine with it going to the public hearing and hearing from the public and what they think. But I think I like the idea of enforcement, because I think these people most of them know they're outside of what there should be in the way of providing Airbnb and vacation rentals. They know they're outside the area, but they still continue to do it. So I think we will be doing some enforcement. Yes. So what is your pleasure, council? There's a couple of recommendations there.
That council give first and second reading to bylaw 1170-2022, cited as zoning amendment bylaw number 1170-2022, and that council direct staff to schedule a public hearing for bylaw 1170 on Wednesday, July 6th at 7 p.m. in the council chambers, and that council give first and second reading to bylaw 1171, cited as Corporation of the Village of Cumberland Business License Amendment bylaw number 1171-2022, and that council direct staff to include a proactive enforcement of vacation rental regulations in the review of the village's bylaw enforcement policy, and as part of that discussion, provide further details on financial impacts.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next, that council, the next one is up to council to do. Move 6.2.
Okay, that council adopt the election procedures amendment bylaw number 1169, 2022.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next, no new business, notice, motions, and announcements. Wastewater upgrade open house June 15th at 4:30 p.m. and 6 p.m. at 2934 Alveston Avenue. I would recommend that you have boots on your feet. Homelessness and Affordable Housing Committee June 15th at 9:15 a.m. here. and Accessibility and Inclusion Committee, June 20th at 3 p.m. here in the village office chambers. Question period. Please send questions by email to info@cumberland.ca using subject line question period. Note, please limit to questions only. Comments will not be read.
Just a correction that the Homelessness Affordable Housing Committee June 15th meeting has been canceled.
Oh, it has been? Okay. Thank you. Yes, Rachel?
Okay, we have some questions that were submitted earlier today on the vacation rental zoning amendment bylaw, 1170. And I believe staff answered the first two questions in their report, but I'll read out the third question. Will there be amendments brought forward to council about the proposed bylaws 1170 and 1171, which is the business license amendment, and the zoning amendment, but as a result of the public consultation meeting in July? And I believe they are referring to the public hearing.
The public hearing. Council is always open-minded going into a public hearing and can change anything after they've had presentations from the public.
Except density.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, we have another question just come in on vacation rentals. Oh, no, sorry, the guest, I think this is the development permit and variance for 2nd Street. They're asking for confirmation that the vacation rental business licenses are giving to the address rather than the owners. If that's the case, these owners shouldn't have to need to reapply, but they should have been grandfathered in under the previous applicable bylaws. I think that's just a statement rather than a
Okay.
question.
Did you want to answer that, Courtney, or do you?
Yeah, I could confirm that the business license is issued to both the property and the owner. And if the ownership does change, it is a new business license that is required, according to our bylaw.
Thank you. Okay. Nothing further? No, okay. Closed portion, recommendation, please.
I'll move the council close the meeting to the public pursuant to section 90 of the community charter to consider these bullets.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Carried.